Sweet Counterpoint. The fine art of combining melodic lines without stripping them of their independence. If you're hearing this word for the first time, you may want to listen to episode 22, Voice Leading. Otherwise, learn all about this composition technique by diving into its pool of rules. Stay afloat with your swim coaches, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, that's a good intro for this episode, actually.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, sir.
What is that you have in your hands?
I have a big, long sheet of paper here, like 2 or 3. These are notes.
Notes for the Counterpoint episode.
Notes for a Counterpoint episode.
Guess what I have in my hand?
Notes for a Counterpoint episode? as well as a iced cafe latte from
my brother Chris. He came by to pick up one of our audio kits, and I asked him to bring me a blended coffee beverage because I made a big deal out of that in the last episode, didn't I?
Yeah.
But he brought me a nice coffee beverage, so I'm going to try and keep that at bay. And during that episode, the one episode I did make a big deal out of that on, I went back editing, and I heard all this paper between the two of us shuffling and ruffling and. We're gonna have to move on to iPads at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll try and keep it chill on this episode.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do our best.
Yeah. So, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about the fine art of counterpoint. The word counterpoint in English comes from the Latin word contrapunctus, and it basically means note against note. And this is the process by which two melodies have historically been combined together. And it is actually out of this process of counterpoint, 2 or more melodies, I should say. It is out of this process of counterpoint that the laws of music theory evolved. People often don't really give counterpoint enough credit for being really the beginning of the 12-note major and minor system that we have today. But it really kind of is, and it's really something that's important to know, because it will help you understand how this stuff works. It will help you to understand how chords were created in the first place, and sort of how they work, how they move together, what makes a chord, these kind of things. Very important.
Different theorists have different approaches for teaching counterpoint, and some of them started off, do they just bring it right up in the first?
Oh yeah, I've seen people where Theory 1 is effectively a counterpoint class. It's like, welcome to music theory, this is what's called counterpoint, and you go into it from there. I've seen other approaches in which, you learn chords and chord progressions and part writing and essentially all the stuff we've been talking about on this podcast, and then at a later point as a quote-unquote advanced theory or maybe supplementary theory, you go back and learn counterpoint as as sort of a thing outside of the sort of traditional repertoire of theory.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've seen people that sort of do both. They sort of try to approach theory from a contrapuntal standpoint, So yeah, there are a lot of different ideas about how this should be taught. And your theory professors can have strong opinions about what is the best way. We are not immune from having strong opinions by any stretch of the imagination. So.
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Well, hey, I know that we took, when I was back in school, we were studying from the Stefan Koska and Dorothy Payne's tonal harmony text.
It's a very, very popular and famous theory textbook. Yeah.
Some of you may be studying from that too. Now, this particular method saves counterpoint for a good deal later on.
Yes, it does.
Now, the Harmony and Context by Miguel A. Roig Francoli starts off a little earlier in Counterpoint.
Yeah, he that's one of the ones that tends to try to weave some counterpoint concepts into the basic theory discussion. And then there are textbooks that are solely counterpoint. You know, I want to say Joseph Kerman. I'd have to look that back up, but I think he has one. Maybe not.
I know he did the listening things, but I don't know if he...
Yeah, and Saltzer and Schachter definitely have one. And that are books that are just totally the rules of counterpoint. It's a textbook in and of itself.
So you could fill a whole semester?
Oh, easily.
Oh, boy.
And it's some of the bigger places where they have bigger theory programs, you can even fill a couple of semesters. There may be Counterpoint 1 and Counterpoint 2. It's not all altogether off the table.
Well, we're going to try and accomplish this all within 2 episodes. This will be a part 1 and a part 2.
Yeah, we're going to try to do that because it is very brain worky. It is yeah. Get your iced coffee beverage or whatever your drink of choice is, and get ready to sort of bend your brain to this because it is a sophisticated subject.
So let's talk a little bit about, before we get into the thick of this, let's talk about why we're learning this.
Why are we doing this to you?
Why are we doing this to you?
Well, music theory, and of course, when I say music theory, what I mean is the theory of Western tonal harmony.
Of course.
Western with a capital W, meaning Europe and the Americas, and the music system that came out of that. There's all sorts of other things that go on in the world.
As we're currently teaching.
Right. But the Western harmony system as we know it today, and as it was known for hundreds of years, evolved from this. It evolved from counterpoint. Counterpoint, in its turn, sort of evolved from the single-line melodies of Gregorian chant, which was a big part of European music in the Middle Ages. When you get into pre-Middle Ages, we get a little fuzzy on exactly what was happening, but we know that the Middle Ages was a lot of chant, a lot of Gregorian chant and other kinds of chant. Out of that evolves counterpoint, and out of counterpoint evolves the tonal harmony system that was used to write music all through, the 16, 17, 18, and 1900s, and before it was largely abandoned in the 20th century, and is still the basis for popular music now.
Right. It's my understanding that counterpoint in the Renaissance, or the mid to late 1500s, was they followed this very strict set of rules, right?
Very, very strict set of rules.
But
yes.
we still use those as our model, right?
We still use those as our model. We've even mentioned a couple of the rules that were in our theory discussions, which strictly speaking were counterpoint rules. Things like no parallel octaves, no parallel fifths. These are actually counterpoint rules that we're still obeying well up through the centuries of tonal harmony.
We actually touched on some of these principles in episode 22 when we talked about voice leading.
Right.
So you're going to maybe recognize a few of these rules, but we'll touch on them again.
Yeah. And for just to keep things conceptually straight in your head, historically, it's not so much that those rules still apply now that we're teaching counterpoint. Historically, it was more that those rules still applied as we started to create tonal harmony, right? They came first as counterpoint rules.
Right, okay.
Back in the Renaissance.
In fact,
the Renaissance.
In 1725, we had an Austrian composer and theorist, Johann Joseph. Help me out with this last name, Matt.
Fuchs.
It is spelled F-U-X.
It is spelled F-U-X, and much Beavis and Butthead level of comedy has ensued from music students everywhere, us included.
I'm stifling my inner 12-year-old here.
I've always said Fuchs, and I always heard Fuchs.
Well, let's go with that. Johann Joseph Fuchs published the Gradus ad Parnassum.
The Gradus ad Parnassum, the Steps to Parnassus. And this was sort of a seminal treatise on counterpoint in which he basically wrote down sort of the best practices that everybody had been following for a while at that time.
Right, because this was 200 years after the inception of
Yeah.
the monophony. And
Yeah. So what happens is, we're throughout the Middle Ages, we're just singing a single melody, maybe in octaves, right? But that's about it. We were pretty much just singing a single melody. Towards the end of the Middle Ages, we start doing things like organum,
okay,
and ars nova and stuff, and the lines start reflecting some independence, right? Going into the Renaissance, those lines start having a great amount of independence, right? And they eventually get codified into chord progressions, but that's later. So, in this time in the Renaissance that we're talking about, Fuchs writing this book, is a time when these lines, when, nobody really thinks in terms of chords or harmony. What they think of is in terms of polyphony, multiple melodies at a single time.
right.
And what these rules that Fuchs laid out is designed to do, and he writes this book, and it's one of these classical treatises books where he set it up as a conversation between a student and a master. If you're familiar with literature at this time, you kind of have this deal, where it's just this conversation where someone says, I forget the name of the master in that book. I could go back and. But, the student comes in and says, "Oh, great master, how might I go about writing a melody that sounds beautiful?" And the master says, "Well, I'll tell you, pupil of mine."
Grasshopper.
Yeah, and then it starts laying out these rules, which is kind of it's kind of
like
our
podcast. It's very conversational.
It's kind of like this podcast. Yes, yes, it is. Our podcast is the modern day version of this classic pedagogical technique.
Imagine that.
Which is great. Which is just great. They got that technique from the Greeks, right? The Renaissance means renewal. It was a time when everybody said, "Hey, the Greeks and ancient Romans had this great civilization. We should be doing what they were doing," and so they have all this. So yeah, where was I? Oh yeah, Counterpoint. So he writes this book, and he basically lays out these common practice ideas. This is kind of what everybody is doing, and they sort of become the laws of counterpoint. And what Fuchs is trying to do, and by extension what the laws of counterpoint is trying to do, is give you the ability to write multiple melodies that are going to be played simultaneously, sung simultaneously, really, back in the day, that will nevertheless retain their own independence. So nothing will ever sound like it is subservient to another melody. Nothing will ever sound like it kind of quit doing anything. Nothing will ever sound like it's just not a good melody anymore.
Or supplemental. Like say
nothing will sound supplemental, that everything will have a equal sort of democratic level of melodic independence. Like you could take any of those melodies out, play them by themselves, and they would make perfectly good sense.
That could stand alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And that's that was just sort of the kind of the goal at the time, and the zeitgeist at the time. All of this stuff was sung. Singers liked good melodies. Melodies that were not independent were could be very difficult to sing in some cases. There were a lot of reasons why this was an important thing. Keep in mind that we have moved from just one melody at a time to many melodies at a time. So what theorists and composers are concerned about is having that kind of make sense, and not just be a big jumble of noise. We don't really know what chords are yet. So we're just trying to have all of these melodies going at once and have them still kind of make sense and still sound good.
Yeah. Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to, I think, like we said for this episode, we're going to talk about, I think what we're going to try and do is set up a melody that follows these rules, and we're going to build it throughout these 2 episodes. So by the end of part 2, we're going to have a full 4-part fifth species counterpoint.
Oh, God. Let's see how well that works.
Yeah, man. We got until the next episode to figure that part out. But you want to start off with the melodic line by itself?
Let's start off with the melodic line in species counterpoint. Now, in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, polyphony was often built on pre-existing melodies. these melodies were Gregorian chants, right? They were the things that they had been singing all throughout the Middle Ages. The church was still very powerful, and a lot of what composers would do would be to take these melodies and use them as the first melody over which they would write new melodies in counterpoint, and create pieces of music.
So there's no originality going on just yet here, right? I mean, someone originally wrote these melodies, but they're still taking these, what they consider to be traditional melodies, and starting to play with them and build on them, right?
Right, well...
Build with them.
Build with them, yeah. It's a little bit of a sticking point. Gregorian melodies are considered sacred-ish, or maybe even sacred without the ish. There are people who are experts on this, and I'm not one of them. But they are largely left intact. Things that would happen would be their rhythms might be elongated, So, what was going by fairly fast in the original Gregorian chant would go by much more slowly, and that was an organum thing. And essentially just on top of that, they would just add melodies on top, and the melodies they were creating on top of it were original. But that baseline melody was often a Gregorian chant, and it was called the cantus firmus.
The cantus firmus.
The fixed song, fixed line. Right. So this is the thing that's not going to change. Right.
The control.
The control version, and it's really fascinating all the interesting stuff they can do with diminution and other things with cantus firmi, and that's the plural, by the way, cantus firmi with an I, right? It's Latin.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of fascinating all the different kinds of stuff they could do and all the different kinds of things they would do, and these melodies would be from Gregorian chant, but that didn't necessarily mean you could hear the Gregorian chant as a thing in them, because of everything else that was going on. When somebody would, like Guillaume Dufay would write a piece called Ave Maria Stella. Ave Maria Stella is a Gregorian chant, right? And he would write, he would take that, and where it goes, Ave Maria Stella, that's an approximation. Those notes would be lengthened out and last a longer time, and melodies would go on top of that.
Okay.
So one person would be singing that, but other people would be singing other stuff.
All around that. So,
and when he would write Missa Ave Maria Stella, he would use that melody, but use the words from the Mass. So, it would be the words from the Credo or the Agnus Dei or what have you.
To that melody?
Yeah. One thing he would do. Like I said, there are experts on these things, and we could talk at length about the different things they used, about the imitation Mass and all of that stuff.
Oh, we got to save some for the Middle Ages music and Renaissance music, don't we?
Yes, we do. We actually do have to do that. We have to do that. We have to save some for that and have to give, certain professors time to actually study stuff that they haven't had to teach in a while or learn in a while. And all right, so moving on.
Okay, so what they do is they're going to take this cantus firmus, or this predetermined melody.
Yep.
And they're going to add another line to accompany this melody, but we're going to have a set of rules, a thick set of rules. And if you want to, I can name these rules, and you can just kind of explain each one a little bit. Do you want to try that, or what?
Yeah, or do you want to start off with just how to build a cantus firmus?
Let's build a cantus firmus.
Because before we can start adding notes to a cantus firmus, let's try to talk about the rules of those cantus firmi themselves.
Are we going to build a Matthew Scott Phillips original here?
Oh, let's see if we can do that.
And pretend like it was written many hundreds of years ago?
Yeah, let's do that.
So let's build a cantus firmus.
Let's build this cantus firmus. And we should say at the outset, the idea behind the Fuchsian method of counterpoint pedagogy is kind of like a laboratory setting. What we're learning here is how pitches relate to each other and how to affect something that was beautiful in a Renaissance-y kind of way with those notes, with those pitches. So this, we're not really writing real music here. This is kind of like an experiment, right? So being the good experimentalists that we are, we're only going to experiment with one, maybe two things at a time. Really just one thing at a time.
Great.
Right? So when we were designing our cantus firmus, there is not really a rhythmic component to this.
Okay.
All right, so we're not going to be writing in half notes and quarter notes. Number one, they didn't really have exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, we don't want to bring rhythm into this yet. We're just talking about notes. One note to the next, how those notes work. It's a sort of experiment. Right?
They didn't have drum kits in ancient masses.
They did not. They had percussion instruments.
They did?
Yeah, but that was secular music, man. That was this is high, sacred church music.
People who could afford the pen
Stuff
and ink
going on
and
here.
Yeah.
Not always, but yeah.
These rules certainly apply
Yeah.
more so to that music.
Yeah, well, these rules actually apply to everything. Applied to
Oh.
popular music, church music. This was just how you wrote music. It was an interesting time.
Very cool.
I would imagine. I wasn't there. not quite that old.
We read.
Yeah. So these melodic lines are diatonic,
Okay.
meaning they will stay in a particular mode. Keys are not really a thing yet. So what we consider the major scale is really the Ionian mode.
Right.
And it's not really the most common.
Hmm.
The two most common are Dorian and Mixolydian. So I'm going to start my cantus firmus in let's be in a Dorian mode. I like it better.
Yeah.
You like my organ sound?
I love the organ sound.
Okay. So Dorian mode. And I am not an ancient music theorist person. There are people who specialize in that. There are this would have just been Dorian from D to D using all white keys, for example. And then hypodorian, the same notes from A to A would be like a completely different thing, right?
Yeah, so that the hypodorian is actually the Aeolian, right? Just A minor.
Yeah, but
minor.
they didn't think of it that. Yeah, this is a time before equal temperament, which meant some things were really easy and some things were not.
Okay.
Because of the way the ratios played out.
But as far as our students are concerned, Aeolian being the minor, natural minor.
Yeah.
Dorian being natural minor with the raised sixth.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Cool.
A Aeolian would actually might even be in different octaves. D Dorian, the final is going to be D. And what that means is we're kind of allowed to, in hypodorian, we would kind of be allowed to go up to A and then down to A. But that final is going to be D. Whereas if we were in Aeolian, it would of course be A that was the final.
So we're still talking. Bless you.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about a tonal center of some kind. Or are we?
I wouldn't really actually call it that. That word has connotations that we're going to do all this kind of stuff, like we're going to and have a 5 chord that, and all that good stuff that we've been talking about up until this point. And that's all stuff that in the Renaissance is not a thing yet.
Right.
What we have is a note that we like to end on.
We had to put ourselves, okay. But for some reason that is pleasing to us.
Yeah.
We just don't know exactly why yet.
We just don't know exactly
The
why
science
yet.
behind. Okay, that's cool. Let's continue with building our cantus
All
firmus.
right. So these are diatonic. Repeated notes are very, very uncommon. For the reason that, remember, this is kind of an experiment. To repeat a note will start to imply a rhythm. However slow a one, it'll start to imply that this note happened twice. So this is introducing a rhythmic component.
Is it like this is an important note? That's why we're accenting it? Or,
Yeah.
why does that lend itself to a rhythmic component?
Well, because think about it. Now this note has lasted twice as long as all the other notes once you've repeated it, right?
Right.
So by that very definition, or by that very phenomenon, you have brought time into your experiment, right? Oh well, this is twice as long. So you have brought time into your experiment.
You're introducing some kind of a pulse, maybe.
You're introducing some kind of a pulse,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and remember, this is a laboratory. We're musical scientists. We're experimenting. We're experimenting with how notes work against each other. So Repeated notes, very uncommon in a cantus firmus.
Okay.
Kind of don't do it.
Right on.
Kind of just don't do it.
Let's kind of just don't do that.
Yeah, let's kind of just don't do it. Yeah, and until unless of course you have a Gregorian chant and you say, well, Pope Gregory did it. But I can almost guarantee you he didn't. So knock it off.
Okay.
The melodic motion is mostly by step, and this is very important. So. From one note to the next. There's not a lot of leaps going on. The reason we do that is because notes that are separated by a step, be it half step or whole step, when they're very close together like that, they can be perceived as being part of the same melody, right? So. That doesn't sound like I've got two different melodies going on at all, right? It's very easy to hear that as one thing that one person would sing. And remember, we're trying to put these notes together in a way that makes this melody sound good and independent and like a melody.
So if you're actually viewing this on notation, or in the case of neumes or whatever you would be reading, the contour of this melody would be very, very limited.
Very small.
Very small contour.
Yeah,
not a
very
lot
small.
of big, yeah.
Right now.
We're
not done yet.
We got ways to go, don't we?
Yeah. Leaps are acceptable. There's just about 100 gazillion rules that you have to follow.
Oh, man.
Yeah. For example, no augmented or diminished intervals. That right there, not going to happen.
Yeah, okay.
That was a tritone, devil's interval. Remember from previous podcasts?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, not a thing.
Or the devil will get you.
Yeah. No diminished intervals, no augmented intervals. We're talking perfect intervals and major and minor intervals exclusively.
So you can have leaps, just not those kinds.
Just not those kind. And, this is, dissonance is something that has to be treated very, very carefully, because dissonance can destroy your sense of a melody in Renaissance ears. So they have to be treated very, very carefully. You don't just randomly do them. So don't leap by dissonance.
Okay.
Bad idea.
How else can we not leap?
Stay away from leaps larger than a perfect fifth, unless it's a perfect octave, and stay away from that too in a cantus firmus. Right?
That sounds like kind of a challenge to a Middle Ages singer. Not someone in their Middle Ages, but
someone, Renaissance singer.
Renaissance singer, yeah.
Yeah, well, they can be difficult to sing. Leaps bigger than we can get. People can get there just fine. Very Renaissance-y, right? When you get beyond that, it's not that it can be difficult to sing, but more troublesome than that. Is there just one melody here? Or am I playing two melodies and have just sort of arpeggiated?
That are kind of implied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That distance there messes with our ability to clearly and definitively say this is only one melody. I mean, there's a such thing as a compound line, right? And that where that upper note is really kind of your soprano, right?
Yeah. Nice.
And we don't want that yet. We want everything to be clearly a discernible melody. So avoiding leaps bigger than a fifth is generally a good idea. Occasionally ascending minor sixes are cool. So you can go, but they must be followed by a resolution down to the fifth. By doing that, what you've basically done is, don't worry, I'm keeping this in my little space here, So that's good.
So you can do an ascending minor sixth, but you don't want to do a descending minor sixth?
Well, we'll talk about descending in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. A descending minor sixth. What's a minor sixth below? So yeah, now how's that going to be a melody, right?
I don't know. I can't think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. Yeah, wouldn't do that.
Not back then.
Not back then. Because that minor sixth doesn't have a good place to resolve to, right? It doesn't have a good place to go. So it's messing with our sense that this is a melody. You know? And a lot of these rules are to keep you writing melodies that are clearly single melodic lines.
And a lot of these rules don't just involve the process of the leap. They also involve what happens after the leap.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For example, all leaps should be preceded or followed by contrary motion, stepwise motion. So if you're going to leap, don't leap all around. No. Those just sound to Renaissance ears. Those just sound like random notes.
Right.
Right. There's no rhetoric to them. Right?
No rhetoric.
So to keep that sense of a clear, unarguable melody, whenever you do leap, you should usually follow it with contrary motion. So you should move stepwise in the opposite direction.
From whence you came.
Yeah. You can get away with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or if you, if you could precede that leap with contrary motion, like. Right? So all this contrary motion leading up to my leap. And your contrary motion means the opposite direction. So rise up to a note and leap down, or leap up to a note and then walk down.
Great.
Right? Yeah. And usually stepwise is best.
Yeah.
Consecutive leaps can be a bad idea.
We want our contour to look like rolling hills, not a cityscape, not a skyline, right?
Yeah. Some other random rules: minor sixes must be followed by contrary motion. Perfect octaves must be followed by contrary motion, and that is a dissonance thing. Honestly, that note has a strong tendency to want to come down. Yeah. This is something, the minor sixth is the inversion of the major third, and in the Renaissance is still considered something of a dissonance. Not as much of a dissonance as a major second, and not as completely unforgivable as a tritone or a diminished seventh or something. But it's still considered a kind of dissonance, something that you need to resolve properly. And by the way, they don't care whether this is a simultaneity or an arpeggiation is immaterial to Renaissance composers in terms of whether it's a dissonance or not. It's still a dissonance whether it's one after the other, whether they play together. A dissonance is a dissonance, and a consonance is a consonance.
Sounds fair.
Perfect eighths the same thing should happen. You absolutely have to fill in that octave. You have to walk back down and fill in that octave. Otherwise, you have created two voices. If you try to do a leap of an octave and then continue on, you've got a voice up here and just had a note and a different voice down here, right? Mm-hmm. And that's pretty clear, right? So if you leap an octave, try not to leap an octave, especially in your cantus firmus. But if you have to leap an octave, you absolutely have to walk that back down and fill in that octave. And if you go down an octave, you absolutely have to walk it back up. Just for the sake of saying we're in the same voice we always have been.
It seems like the cantus firmus, if you have big leaps in the cantus firmus, that sets up another series of challenges when you're trying to add those extra full voices in terms of pushing the vocal ranges of your performers.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. Yeah, the bigger the leap, the more you're kind of invading the space of the voice above you. You know, even if there's no voice above you, even if you're the soprano, you know, when you leap really high, you're almost implying that there's a voice above you now, whose space you have just invaded.
You invaded an inferred space.
Yeah, you have invaded, inferred space.
Sensitive.
And we have no idea what's in inferred space, so don't do it.
Yeah, don't invade what you don't know.
Yeah, that's going to be in the next Star Trek series or something. Yeah. The inferred space drive. We're going to leap into inferred space.
Well, let's talk
Captain, we are entering inferred space. So what are you trying to say?
about... I don't know.
Are you calling me incompetent? Because he's inferring. All right, moving on.
Well, let's talk about double leaps.
Double leaps. Yeah, let's talk about double leaps and how, again, really try to avoid these. A lot of these rules are like, there are exceptions and things where they're okay, but, your first order of business is to try to not do these. If you do these, if you leap twice, successive leaps in the same direction, so nope, right? Leap in the same direction, and as I did, try to outline a major or minor triad when you do those. Because those things, in Renaissance terms, they are leaps that they're not great, but they're at least leaping from one acceptable consonance to another.
Yeah.
So, you should definitely do that. You should definitely, if you are going to do two successive leaps, they should both be preceded and followed by stepwise contrary motion. Yeah. So, right? That big leap in the middle there, both preceded and followed by contrary stepwise motion. And this is just because you're really shaking the foundations of this is a clear melody here, I mean, even with the triad. Is that a melody? Really? Renaissance people would say that's not a good melody. Tonal harmony people later on and later centuries will say that's a chord.
Yeah, right.
That's accompaniment, right? So is this really a melody?
Yeah.
So yeah, the more you sort of shake at the boundaries of clear, concise, unarguable melody, the more rules you have to follow, so sort of as a way of preserving that sense.
Now,
the more careful you have to be.
And when you're doing double leaps, you're saying stick to major and minor intervals. Don't do diminished or augmented?
Don't do diminished or augmented intervals, period.
Yeah, okay, so...
under any circumstance.
Okay. Why now... Let's
Dissonance.
See. Yeah. Okay.
They are unacceptable dissonances.
For the same reasons we discussed earlier.
For the reasons we've discussed earlier, and even in separate podcasts, dissonances are something that don't sound good, according to the laws that were old, even in the time of Fuchs.
Okay.
Dissonances are notes that don't sound good together, and if you're going to use those, they have to be treated very, very carefully, and probably shouldn't even really be there in a cantus firmus, because you're going to have to treat them carefully later, right?
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So a second ago we talked about the contour. Kind of the shape of the melodic line.
A little bit, yeah.
Let's touch on that a bit more.
Okay.
Because there are some rules that actually are centered around that.
Yes, there are. There definitely are. So, again, and like the majority of these rules, they're designed to help you create something that is very clearly a melody. All right. So they are the rules shaping contour. Your melody should have a definable climax.
Okay.
And that is a note that is the highest note that it reaches, and that note should only be reached once. So
No.
yeah.
Was that the one? The highest note? Yeah. So that was the climax of that little teeny tiny melody.
Except I kind of messed up because I didn't follow my leap there. My descending leap was contrary motion, did I? I continued in the same direction.
How easy is that to mess up? So
Bad theorist.
Let's do
Bad.
Let's do another one that actually.
We should leave that in there too.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So let me correct my mistake, Master Fuchs. And
don't Fuchs this up.
There you go. So there was a clear highest note there, right? Yeah.
Climax.
Yeah, and I only reached that note once. Don't hang around it. Don't No.
You need to stick a higher note over that after you've done that motion.
So, there you go. Trying to obey all those rules at once in your head is just... There's a reason this crap isn't improvised, all right?
Yeah,
they wrote this out and checked it and rechecked it.
They didn't jam on that riff. They didn't just jam on it.
Yeah.
But, a lot... I say that, but, a lot of guitar solos seem to follow the same kind of rules. When you hear a really good guitar solo, it'll often do the same kind of thing.
I wonder why that is.
Because it feels good and sounds good. And
I wonder why it feels good and sounds good, though.
Oh, I don't know. Why, Matt?
You think maybe because a good guitar solo is something that conforms at least vaguely and at least nominally to the basic rules of counterpoint?
It would seem so.
That a good guitar solo is something that at least approximates what Fuchs would have called a good melodic line. Maybe not every single rule, right? I mean, we are several hundred years later, but a lot of these principles can be carried over into how do I write a good guitar solo?
Well,
if I'm a singer, how do I sing a good melody? If I'm the singer in my band,
I think these rules lend themselves to producing an emotional effect.
Yes, they absolutely do.
And I think guitarists might not even be thinking about these rules, but they are thinking about delivering an emotional effect.
Yeah. Even guitarists who know zero theory go into a good solo, and they know what sounds good and feels good, like you said.
That's who I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's our job as theorists to understand, well, why did that sound good? Why did that feel good? Because, if we can understand why, then we can replicate the effect more efficiently, right? And I think this is a good, at least partial explanation for why a lot of good guitar solos are good guitar solos. Think about your favorite guitar solos.
Mm-hmm.
And think about whether or not they conform to a lot of these rules.
Yeah. Okay, so we just talked about the climax, which is also the high point or the zenith.
It was called the zenith at the time.
Okay. Now, what's the opposite of that?
The opposite of that is the nadir. And that is if your cantus firmus happens to be sort of generally descending in its contour, which is okay. If it's again, I kind of had a lowest point at that point. And that lowest point in a descending line is sort of the equivalent of the highest point in an ascending line. That nadir, it should be the lowest note that you reach. It should be reached really only once, right? And then from there, it should climb back up. Just like in the zenith, it should reach that highest point and then climb back down.
And that's still considered a climax on the lowest end, on the low end.
It's considered a nadir. It's considered sort of an anti-climax, although not really.
I imagine it's a sad song we're singing here, or something bad or lame.
Yeah. Your line doesn't. I don't. I ought to consult a rule book because I'm obviously and honestly fuzzy about some of these things myself. But I don't believe your line has to have both a zenith and a nadir.
Right. Not intentionally? I mean, there's going to be a lowest note and there's going to be a highest note.
There's going to be a lowest note and a highest note, but there's only one that you really have to reach only once.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Although you could still do, I guess, I mean, with a long enough line, you know, you'd, yeah. I guess with a long enough line, you know, it's gonna be hard with all the leap restrictions and stuff. You know, the zenith is the big one. It should have a definite zenith. Yeah, and again, that's just to have good melodic contour, which makes it more recognizable as a melody, right?
So I have in my studies found that this zenith or this nadir cannot be an isolated pitch.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
That means don't just leap up to the zenith and then leap back down and forget about it. You know, work your way up. You know, an isolated pitch, if you're... And you hear how we leapt up to that zenith, leapt back down, never hit it again.
Uh-huh.
You know, it almost exactly is starting to... You can almost hear it be a compound line, right? You can almost hear that... Yeah, right. It is when you have one note that is higher than the others, and it is leapt to and leapt away from. You know, it is really, your ears really start to question whether that was a single melody or whether that was a note borrowed from something that's higher than that.
Well, you can't just go straight to the climax. You got to build up to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you got to build up to it. Yeah, exactly.
Have a little tension, a little something leading up to it. A little foreplay.
Wait a minute. Go to dinner, you know.
Go to dinner. Buy that melodic line.
Bottle of wine. Watch a movie. Yeah.
We're still talking about music, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, so let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so we're narrowing down to the last few big rules regarding the
really
cantus
big
firmus,
rules,
or the original melodic line.
Mm.
And this one's a little weird to me. Let me see what you think about this.
Okay.
The last 3 or 4 notes in the same direction in a
Right.
passage should not stress a tritone.
Right.
We talked about how you don't want to have leaps of a tritone.
Yeah. So if I were to... We all heard that tritone, right?
Yeah.
Basically, the problem is you cannot disguise that horrificness with extra notes. So you have not disguised that horrificness at all.
You can't polish a tritone.
Exactly. You cannot polish a tritone. It will always be a tritone, and a few notes in between the 2 notes that are a tritone does not help. So you can't sort of outline a tritone that way, you know.
And are we finding this? Is this outline being kind of accented by the fact that they're on kind of accented rhythms, or they're kind of special?
Well,
parts
we're not
in
talking
rhythm?
about rhythms.
We're not talking about rhythms. Okay.
There's no rhythms in our little laboratory experiment.
Right.
They are being accented by the fact that they are the highest note and the lowest note of a stepwise descension.
Okay. The contour accents them more so.
Yeah. If I had gone on to A, that would have been a little more acceptable. I don't know how folks would have felt about even that, really. But that would have been a little more acceptable than having them outline that way. You know?
Cool. Now, this last little convention here sounds kind of like it's hearkening the tonal harmony, the concept of tonal harmony, because it is suggesting that melody should end on the final.
The final,
Or the
what
step-
we would otherwise call scale degree 1.
Yeah.
You know, so always land on the 1.
Always, huh?
In your cantus firmus, it's a good idea. In real music, this is a time when cadences were octaves and fifths. That there was no dissonances on the final notes of anything.
Hmm.
You know, And by no dissonances, we mean no, not even thirds. We could have thirds and stuff in the melody, but they had to end on an octave and fifth. That's how they sort of signify that it was over, by that sound of open intervals. So, yeah, you've got to land on the 1.
Great. Now, if we had sponsorship, this would be the point where we say that we're going to take a short break.
But we don't, so we're just going to quit talking.
Okay, we're back, everybody. Now let's talk about. Okay, so we've discussed everything we need to know about building that first line, that cantus firmus, that strong, or what did you call it, fixed song?
That fixed line.
Fixed line. So now it's time to. That was monophony. That was one line of music.
Well, we didn't actually build a cantus firmus yet.
Should we go ahead and build one before we move on?
Let's build one.
Let's build a cantus firmus.
Let's build a cantus firmus. All right. So I'm going to be in D.
I hope you're
minor.
keeping up
and
with all these
I've been
rules.
talking about D Dorian a lot, but I actually think D minor, D Aeolian is going to also be okay, because if we lower this B flat, we have a perfect fourth between F and B flat, which gets rid of that tritone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. All right. So in building my cantus firmus, first 3 notes, I'm just going to do some stepwise motion. I'm going to start on 1. Nice and easy, right? I will then move back down and leap up, but in doing so, be sure to proceed after the leap in the opposite direction. Right?
Very nice.
So far. From there, I need to start thinking about my climax note. So I'm going to try to work up to this, see if I can get up to this A. Yeah, there's my climax note, right?
The 5th of the mode.
Yes.
Or the scale. The mode. Yeah.
And so now I just have to end on 1.
Okay.
So.
Beautiful.
Sounds very middle-agey, doesn't it?
And you managed to follow all those rules.
I think.
We'll
Pretty
go
sure.
back and double check.
We
But I
can
think
double
you did
check.
it.
I don't think I outlined any tritones or anything.
Didn't hear him?
Yeah, so one more time.
Nice.
Cantus firmus.
There's the cantus firmus, which is just a mere part, just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, we are not even into counterpoint yet because we haven't even put another line to it yet.
We're still in monophony.
We're still a monophony.
Well, let's become a polyphony.
This is a monophonous relationship over here.
Are we still talking about music?
Always.
Yeah.
That's all we ever talk about.
Okay, so now that we have that wonderful line, we need to start to talk about counterpoint and start adding adding another line to it.
Yes. Yeah. So there are some conventions and some rules to this. Big surprise. That if you follow will result in good, beautiful, pleasant sounding counterpoint, in which both of those melodies still are recognizable as independent melodic lines themselves, right?
And it's also my understanding that we'll be applying these rules to not only the second line, but the third and fourth line. However many lines you have, they need to all follow this set of rules we're about to discuss, correct?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because the idea is to have them all independent melodic lines.
Yeah, the idea is that they are all independent melodic lines that make sense both together and individually. Yeah. So they were all not only conform to the rules of the melodic line that we just talked about, but in addition, there are some new rules to consider because they're going to be played together.
Okay.
2 lines played together are going to create some new considerations.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about these considerations.
Yeah. So one thing, climaxes, zeniths, or naders should should occur at different times in your two melodies. They should not happen together.
Okay.
The reason being is if these two melodies hit their highest notes at the same time, then it messes with our ability to understand them as two melodies that are independent of each other.
Right.
Right? Because they're doing this really important thing, hitting their highest notes congruently. So it starts to sound more like a part that's been doubled.
Yeah.
Than it does two independent melodies.
Right.
So do those at different times.
Okay, so you got two lines. You got to make sure one line's climax or zenith or nadir doesn't happen at the same time as the new line or any other new lines that we add.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Begin the counterpoint. All counterpoints begin on consonant intervals. So these melodies are going to start and end on a consonant interval. A consonant interval being a unison, an octave, or a fifth, right?
That's about as consonant as it got back then.
That's as consonant as it ever gets.
As it gets today, I guess.
Yeah,
still.
even perfect fourths, in some cases, were considered a dissonance. We have the 4/3 suspension now because a perfect fourth was considered a dissonance that had to be resolved.
And I love that 4/3 suspension.
Don't you just love it?
It's wonderful.
Yeah, dissonances aren't bad. You just got to handle them the right way, and they create beauty when they're handled the right way.
Yeah.
So saith Fuchs. Right. So if I began my cantus firmus on this note, which I did, my options are beginning the second line on that one, which might cause some confusion.
Yeah.
Or I could begin it on the perfect fifth. Or I could begin it on a perfect octave. And you can begin it on a perfect unison. Those two notes, that single note can split into one. That single note can split into two lines. What has to happen is one of them has to kind of go down and one of them has to go up.
Right.
They can't follow each other. So, if your cantus firmus is descending, then you can start a second line as a unison that is then ascending.
So when I'm singing a harmony, just in one of my bands, often what I'm doing is following in parallel motion with the climax and the zenith up and down with the original melody, with their cantus firmus. But that's a different concept, obviously, than what's going on here. That would have been shunned a long time ago.
That's harmonic motion.
That's harmonic motion.
And what Fuchs would have said is that you're just singing the same melody and starting at different intervals.
Yep. So it has no independence.
Yeah.
Between the two of those.
I've heard some of your band's harmonies, and I would I would love to have an example of some of those things because I think sometimes that's not what you do. There are times when it might be more counterpointy than you're even realizing, but
come to think of it, there might be an example I can pull up. Let me go dig that up real quick. This is called The Parting Glass.
Oh, cool.
This
one.
Yeah, this is my band, Jasper Cole, the Irish band. The Parting Glass is kind of a salute to your comrades, kind of farewell in my time of dying, pensive little bit. And you're going to hear 4-part harmonies, and this is the last couple of lines of the song. Let's give it a listen.
I'll gently rise, and I'll softly call. Good night, and joy be with you all.
So again, that was my boys Jasper Cole back from 2012, the album Drowning the Shamrock. I think we closed with that number. That was Matt Parrish singing lead, myself, Ian Hoppy, Kevin Nicholson, and Ryan Morrison doing harmonies in various places. So there's a part where in the melody he sings, I'll gently rise, and I'll softly call.
Right,
he goes up high. But I'm actually saying, I'll gently rise, and I'll softly call.
Right,
So I'll go ahead and play this again, and I'll sing along. I'll sing my line so you can hear me going against the melody.
I'll gently rise, and I'll softly call. Good night, and joy be with
Now, I might say that while he's going up, I'm going down, but that's not really the zenith or the climax of that part of the melody, right?
I wouldn't think so, but it is an example of lines that exhibit some independence of each other.
Right.
and you see how awesome that sounds too, right?
I liked it.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the big picture, what's going on here is harmony.
Yeah.
But harmony developed out of counterpoint.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and yeah, that's a good example of how these independent lines create, you know, that kind of that kind of consistent harmonic level. So I almost want to call it buzziness.
Yeah.
You know, that exists because those lines feel independent from each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is the kind of thing that Fuchs was going for. You know? And of course, he has a lot more rules than Jasper Cole does about these kind of things.
Yeah.
Him being Fuchs and all.
Right.
But yes, it's a good example of the kind of sounds you get when you're combining multiple melodies.
And I think in that particular example, the first part, me and the lead singer Matt did start on the same line,
The same pitch,
and
yeah.
then we split off
Yeah, it just split off.
on softly call, softly call. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Cool. So
Fun,
this,
huh? So this actually has applications in actual music. Who would have ever thought?
Yeah.
Right?
Who would have thought?
Who would have thunk it?
So cool, man.
Yeah, okay. So, end the counterpoint with a perfect unison or a perfect octave.
Okay.
This is what things were ended on in the Renaissance, and this is what signifies sort of the end of the phrase. You know, you can end on a perfect fifth, but then you have broken the rule, the melodic rule of ending on the one. And in some cases, in three voice and more, you can do that.
Uh-huh.
You know, you'll have to do that, but in this case, let's try to keep it on the one. Let's try to keep it ending on the perfect octave.
On the final,
Yes, on the final.
what will become the tonic.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Okay, so but it's kind of funny that we can start on the perfect fifth, but we have to end on the final. But I guess that's not too crazy.
Nah, you know.
Okay, so in the counterpoint, typically on the unison or perfect octave. Just try and stay away from anything else. Makes sense?
Makes sense.
Okay. Now, we've established the rules of working with two lines of music. Let's and we mentioned a few types of motion while we were doing this.
Yeah.
Contrary motion and so forth.
Yeah. We should probably codify these if we can. So, 4 kinds of motion.
Okay.
Oblique motion. One voice moves up or down. The other stays put. So. Kind of like a drone.
Yeah.
Not considered great, you know, because again in our laboratory like setting here in our little experiment, this is adding a sense of rhythm because this note is twice as long as the others. Even more, how do you call that a independent voice when it's just doing that, right? And even if for a while it's not doing that, and it's, you know, it lost its independence there for a little bit, right? So not considered great in these beginning ideas of counterpoint. Parallel motion, same direction with the same intervals. And this is a classic way to build a good harmony line, you know, Jeremy, as I'm sure you know from singing backing vocals. And
We just talked about that, didn't we? I tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to have a little bit of fun here. Future Jeremy, this is we're going to break some space-time continuum rules here.
all right,
While we're breaking,
love it.
we'll keep the counterpoint rules, but we're going to break some space-time.
Just don't fall
continuum.
into inferred space.
I will try not to. I'll try like heck not to. So you just heard the parting glass.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see what happens if I sing a parallel harmony to the original melody.
Okay.
Give me that D minor chord. So fill unto me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Okay.
Nice.
Now I'm going to copy and paste that and move it forward in the timeline, and future Jeremy's going to come back and add a harmony of a third on top of it, moving in completely parallel motion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So fill unto me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
Great job, future Jeremy. That was
Thank you,
awesome.
thank you.
That was awesome.
Past Jeremy thanks you too.
Parallel thirds, right? Melody and parallel thirds, which is great. Parallel thirds. You can do those all day. Parallel sixes. Let's see if I can get a good one going here. You can do those all day long.
Okay.
Parallel octaves? No. Parallel fifths? No. Because, again, if you just got a voice that's in octaves, how is that two different melodies, right? How are those melodies independent of each other?
Right.
The fifth, believe it or not, kind of the same problem, right?
The old Ben-Hur chariot race.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want your music to sound like that.
Yeah.
And those two melodies don't sound independent from each other.
Not at all.
Yeah, and with oblique motion, even if you only do it for a second, for that second you really had melodies that weren't independent, and that second is going to sound bad. So parallel thirds, great. Parallel sixes, love it. Parallel octaves, no. Parallel fifths, no. Parallel unisons, are you even freaking kidding me right now, right? There's no way parallel unisons are independent of anything, right?
Isn't that also scientifically impossible? We're breaking some kind of a
breaking some kind of inferred space law? Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. You think about, well, what about parallel fourths? And it kind of depends. Parallel fourths were actually considered not okay. At some point, they were again considered okay. If you're taking counterpoint in your theory professor might very well not want you to write parallel fourths, because of the whole, they're just not dissonant enough to be independent, and it's that dissonance level in thirds and sixes that say, well, these are not the same line because it'll listen to that dissonance, right? So they're just not dissonant enough to be considered two separate lines. At some point, they were considered okay. We didn't hold on to the no parallel fourths rule the way we did with no parallel octaves or fifths. For now, let's say no parallel fourths either.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So that's oblique and parallel motion.
Oblique, parallel. Your best friend is going to be contrary motion, in which the voices move in opposite directions from each other. Your best friend. Right? That's pretty much always okay, as long as you're following all the other rules, melodic rules and things. And then there is similar motion, where they're moving in the same direction but not by the same interval. So things like that kind of motion. Okay, as long as you're not breaking other rules. Right?
And not landing on a tritone or anything
and
crazy
not
like
landing
that.
on a tritone. And that was a minor 6. I checked. I was careful.
It didn't sound devilish to me.
Good.
Yeah. So that's contrary motion, and a lot of these rules are kind of based on that. If you leap, you want to follow that with contrary motion.
Right,
going back
opposite
the way you
direction
came.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And then we have, finally, similar motion.
Similar motion. Same direction, but not by the same interval. So, like perfect fifth apart going to a major 6 apart. Something like that.
Because if it was following the same intervals, it would just be parallel motion.
Right.
So the contour is going to be similar, but it won't be the exact carbon copy.
Exactly.
Contour.
Yeah.
Based on
and that not an exact carbon copy is what lends independence to the lines.
Yeah.
Especially when you don't have any kind of rhythm to add independence. So you can't say, well, this one went up after the other one, right? It's only note against note.
Okay. Huh. Well. That, I think that's plenty for now, don't you?
I think probably so. I'm going to take the cantus firmus that I wrote and create a second line
Uh-huh.
for next time. So
And
how about that?
are we actually going to fill the whole thing? We're going to do third and fourth lines too?
I'll give it my best shot.
Okay. Or maybe you can build a second line and I can take a look at it and try and build a
That's
third
a
line.
great idea. And
Oh,
then
yeah?
you can take a look at it and build a third line in first species counterpoint.
Don't mind us. We're just planning the next episode as we sit here and talk to you guys. But I think we got a game plan.
Show notes.
So-
Where's my show notes? Show notes.
What show notes?
Show notes. Okay.
So let's hear that melody one more time because this will be the cantus firmus, the
Yeah.
focal point of our discussion.
Yep. So.
There it is.
There it is.
Next time, we're going to build on that. Species counterpoint. We're going to get into that too.
Definitely tune in.
Good times. See you soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have questions or comments, email us at info@musicstudent101.com. For news and updates, check out the homepage of our website, musicstudent101.com. Now, we're off to work on that counterpoint.